Hey there, my friend. Steve Gamlin here. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Motivational Firewood Radio Show. My guest today is my dear friend and my sister from another Mr. Michelle Fuller. Michelle and I go back. We were both part of an organization called APEC. She is an absolute rock star at everything she talks about, and our paths have been very similar over the years. So part of this show is going to be to get to know Michelle better, but also to talk about something that every year these issues come up. People with their relationships, their self-talk, their self-esteem, where they're going, where they're putting themselves in life, and the things that are keeping them from growing into the beautiful, confident people that we know they deserve to be. So Michelle is the founder of One Bold MF. We know what MF stands for. Michelle Fuller. It stands for some other things too. She's an alpha renegade and a love catalyst. Michelle is a contributing author to a best-selling book. She's also a co-host of the podcast called The Otherwise Undamaged Podcast, and I love it. Michelle, thank you so much for being a part of the Motivational Firewood Radio Show.
I am so excited to be here. This is a long time coming, right?
It is. Yeah, we've been talking about this, and a couple of weeks ago I said, okay, Michelle, get on my calendar. We're going to do this. We're not
I
going to
was
just
so
say
ready.
someday. Yeah, perfect. So let everybody know a little bit of what got you here and how did you become One Bold MF?
Oh man. I am going to give your audience the Cliff Note version because if I really talked about all the things that got me to the place I am, well, we might have gray hair. This is where it all started. Started in my childhood. I was little orphan Annie. I poke fun at it now, but when you're growing up in the 70s and 80s, you have red hair and freckles. You are an easy target for bullies. Understandably, kids can be really mean. But really, what shaped my childhood was my mom. We had a very difficult relationship. And before we could ever come to some kind of resolution or have a good talk about it, before I could really work things out with my mom, she passed away when I was 14. That set the stage for so much of what happened in my adult life. Off I went, barely surviving, wondering what was wrong with me. I was reeling, didn't think I was very intelligent, didn't think I was very attractive. I got married very young. I got divorced 3 or 4 years later. I had a child within that marriage. And then before I turned 30, I was married again and I had another child and I was divorced 3 or 4 years later. In between those times, I was, trying to date, trying to do what single women do, but I was attracting men to my life that frankly were toxic, that weren't good for me. It took me a rock bottom moment in my 40s to realize that I was the person that was responsible for everything that was happening in my life. Talk about a wrecking ball. I mean, literally a wrecking ball. But I had finally hit the wall in my life and I was willing, right? All this work is willingness. I was willing to start making the changes I needed to make to have the love and the life that I deeply desired.
And
It
it takes
does.
that rock bottom for us to get there. I got to rock bottom a little faster than you did. It was at age 35. Different path. I mean, I'd been married for 7 years to my first wife.
Mhm.
And my tendencies and my style and my behavior back then, very non-confrontational, just go with the flow, get along. Don't get in each other's face if there's something bothering you. Go ahead, let it build up. And then when the volcano
Mhm.
finally goes, you realize the volcano does not have a pause button or a dimmer switch, and it just all comes out. And there went that marriage. And I sat in the ashes for a year or two after
Mhm.
that, wondering what the hell happened. And I heard a couple of things you were saying in there, and I want to address this right up front. How was your self-talk through after your first
Mm.
divorce and in your dating and in your marriage? I know you said you were attracting toxic people and toxic partners into your life. What part did your self-talk in the person you saw in the mirror play in that?
Oh man. I really believe that who we bring to us is a reflection of who we are.
Yeah.
It can't be any other way. I never realized that until I hired my first coach. My self-talk was horrible. I am very, very independent. I did very well in a job. That is what I hung my hat on, so to speak. I was very good in this area, but I was very, very toxic and unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy in this area.
Mhm.
This is what I realized, that the men that I attracted to my life either acted like my mother did or treated me the way my mother did.
Mhm.
And I'm getting chills just talking about it, but it is so profound. When you start doing self reflection, which I did and I was willing to do, I realized that my self confidence and self esteem was absolutely pathetic. I just did not think that I deserved someone to love me because I didn't think I was good enough.
Yeah.
And when you don't think you're good enough, you're going to bring people to your life that reflect that.
Yeah.
It can be no other way. The self-talk was, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not attractive enough. You are never going to be able to compete with younger women. You're divorced, you have kids, nobody's going to want you. You're too much, you're too extra. I could go on and on and on. And I think one of the things that I did that you may have done as well, and maybe some of our listeners do as well, is every night before I went to sleep, I would replay all of the crap that happened in my past that was really bad. So every night before I dozed off to sleep, to allow my subconscious to reel and spiel on all of the things that went horrible in my past. Did you do that?
Oh yeah, the low light reel. People talk about in
Yes.
sports, you get the highlight reel. It's like, oh, here's the best plays of the day. And during the
Yes.
darker times, I brutally, I mean, my self-talk in the first decade of this new millennium, because of
Mm-hmm.
what I did to blow up my whole life, my radio career, my marriage, and any shred of financial stability right around 2001, 2002. I blew my
Mm-hmm.
entire life up all at once. So all of my identity, all of everything that had been part of who I was for a decade, flushed it all down the toilet, and my self-talk was brutal. Now the difference between us was I could lace it with humor, so I'd make
Mm.
people laugh, but inside it was basically taking a wrecking ball to a very sensitive part of my anatomy for a decade. And I even had somebody one time said, oh my God, you're hysterical, but please tell me you don't actually believe this stuff you're saying about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, yeah, I do. And that's when I connected with one of my first coaches around 2003 or four, who was, even though I didn't take all of his advice and stop the bad self-talk, it kept going for a number of years till around 2011, 2012, when I finally got the lesson and I
Mm-hmm.
intentionally made a shift. And holy crap, didn't my life start to get better?
It's so amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think back on the survival skills that I utilized to help me cope with what I was actually thinking. I said before that I was fiercely independent. I was very driven. I did very well at my job. And thankfully, I had all of those things intuitively inside me to help me take care of not only myself, but my kids, right?
Right.
I had two kids that I needed to take care of. But what was really unhealthy about it was I used it to compensate for how I really felt about myself. And I avoided doing any work on myself. And that includes forgiveness, acceptance, and taking responsibility, by the way, for anything that I did or said, because I used anger, resentment, bitterness, and judgment to compensate for how I really felt.
Hmm.
I blamed my exes. I blamed my mom. I blamed every single person that had done me wrong instead of looking at my past and looking at how people showed up for me and not only having empathy for who they were and why they ended up with me to begin with, but also taking responsibility for what my part was. Because we're all playing a role in our own lives. And the sooner we take responsibility for how we show up in our own lives, the sooner we can release the emotional ties to people that no longer have a place in our life. And how much faster can you get to the person you want if you leave all of that behind you?
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how when you put down all that weight and you
Mm-hmm.
stop trying to carry it up a mountain, these big rocks, and you have to keep
Mm-hmm.
walking back downward to pick up more baggage and try to drag it up with you, that when you shake all that weight off and you just say, hey, look, it's just me, bottle of water, a snack bar, and a pretty decent pair of boots. We're just going to start climbing as we are and
Yep.
just see how far we get. And when you can look back and see all that baggage and all those boulders farther and farther and farther behind and realize you did not need to go back and carry them up. And you probably spent a few too many years carrying
Yeah.
them anyway. And they were such a part of your identity because you always had them
Mm-hmm.
in a backpack on your shoulder. And my dear friend, Lisa Schermerhorn, Lisa's a therapist and a Reiki practitioner and hypnotherapist. And she always talks about having a backpack full of bowling balls and trying to carry it
Mm-hmm.
up a mountain. And when you finally just take that thing off and just lay it down on a rock or against a tree somewhere and you just start walking, boy, you get there faster. You get there
Mm-hmm.
happier. Your back is going to thank you because you're not carrying that heavy load of
Your
doubt.
body's going to thank you too.
Yeah, your body's going to, your heart's going to thank you and your knees are going to thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
so many people stay in that old identity. And in something you said reminded me for a very, very brief moment in the early 2000s, I considered online dating. And I set up this little profile. It was like a week. I never even went on a single date or anything. I saw this one woman's profile and her screen name, get this, Decimated Dreams, was the name she was using for herself to put
It
out
screams,
there.
I want to date you, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. But it makes me sad now. Like I looked at it at the time and just kind of laughed. Now it makes me sad that that's how this person thought of herself
Mm-hmm.
because of the results of her life. And I'm hoping that she did a lot of the work that you've done. I'm hoping she found a better version of herself. I'm hoping she's being more kind to herself. And I'm hoping she's not
Mm-hmm.
repeating all of the behaviors in the cycles that led her to refer to herself as decimated dreams.
I'm here to shatter the beliefs that women have, particularly over 40, about the success that they can have in relationships. So often, women in general, but especially over 40, struggle the most with dating because they believe that all of the great men are taken. You also believe that because you are over 40, that you are somehow less worthy because of your age. Or if you're a single mom and you're divorced, that somehow prevents you from being with a man who will actually cherish you. I believed all of that. I did. I believed that, I was somehow less worthy than other women because of my divorces, because of my kids, because of my age. I wrote down every single thing that I wanted. This is one of the pivotal things I did when I first started dating. This came with a lot of internal work, but I was very clear about what I wanted, what that relationship was going to feel like, how he was going to be. And I used to get so much crap from other women because one of the things that I wrote down is I don't want to date someone that has kids, or I want to date someone who has older kids. And people thought there was so much judgment around it. And here's why. How could I expect to date someone who doesn't have kids or who has older kids when my kids, well, my son was older, but my daughter she was still fairly young. And I said, because that's what I want. And why shouldn't I have it my way? I know what I want. And the ironic thing is, not only did I marry a man who has no kids, but he's also younger than me. Okay. And we also met on a dating app. And it's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. And by the way, I didn't meet him until I was 44. Okay. And if I had listened to people and what they thought was possible for me, I would have given up and I would not have the man and the relationship that I do have. But here I am on the other side of 2 divorces, 2 failed marriages, a string of relationships that were toxic in between, in the best relationship that I've ever had. When, by the way, that was never modeled for me and I never had it. Don't tell me what's possible.
Yeah.
You
And
get
all
to
those people
decide.
that say, well, you shouldn't want that. You shouldn't expect that because
Mm-hmm.
you're this way. Isn't it amazing how judgmental people get about this stuff? And, I went through my divorce. I didn't go on a single date for more than a year because a big part of me after my divorce, landing in the ashes of everything, not just the marriage, but my career.
Mm-hmm.
I was $62,000 in debt at age 35 because I had not been paying attention to things. And I intentionally did not go on a single date for more than a year. And then I did date this one woman for about 2 years, but it was
Mm-hmm.
just dating. It was just casual. And I was very upfront with that because I was working on the person I knew I wanted to become
Mm-hmm.
for whoever that perfect long-term relationship was going to be. I knew in my heart the relationship I was in when I was dating was not it. And I was very open and honest about it. And we just enjoyed hanging out together. And that was it. And I started to learn about visualization and vision boards, all these things that I teach now, because
Mhm.
you know the ending of this, where this is going, because it made me an expert on this. And everything I've done since then
Mhm.
has made me an expert. So I started to create visualization. You wrote it down. I created it in pictures. The type of guy I knew I needed to be, and the type of relationship I wanted to be, the experiences I wanted us to have, the type of woman I wanted to fall in love with, visual representations of all these things. And if she wasn't so shy, I would invite my Tina down to the recording studio. We were 39 when she reached out by an email after 21 years of zero contact from over 1,000 miles away, because she had moved away, and said, "Hey, I saw your name on social media. I saw you online." She actually saw a
Mhm.
video of me doing stand-up comedy in a club, which is something I did in the early 2000s. She said, "Oh my gosh, the guy that used to hide behind me in math class so he wouldn't get called on is doing stand-up, and you're a speaker, and you were on the radio, and you're writing books and all these things. We should stay in touch."
Mhm.
And this June is our 16th anniversary, because I
Yeah, I
became
love
the
that.
person I wanted to be. And I've never really asked her where she was in her life. She had had a marriage that had ended in divorce, no kids, none for me either. But I've never
Mhm.
really asked her what was she looking for in a person that caused her to want to reach out to me, where we hadn't communicated in 21 years. And
Yeah.
it just comes down to that law of attraction and the timing being right, and not listening to what everybody else says and putting up with other people's crap about what you should want in your life.
Or what you deserve, by the way, because we're so often told that we should just be happy with whatever that is. Or we are told without being told that we need to settle.
Mhm.
If anyone shows up, you should just be grateful that that one person showed up. I did that too. I had a vision board. I also wrote the perfect day for me and this man way before I met Joey, by the way. I wrote down how it felt, what it looked like, what we would say to each other, what he said to me, what I said to him. One of the things that was really, really important to me was to have someone that made me laugh. I knew that this was going to be the relationship that I was going to carry into old age. And I don't care how you slice that, we're all getting older. So what kind of relationship am I going to have with this man when I'm 70 or 80 years old? What are we doing when it's just us? I wanted someone that made me laugh, that created humor. And let me tell you, I got that and then some. But the pictures that I focused on had little to do with the way he looked and more to do with the way it felt. One of the pictures that I had on my vision board was two people with cones on their heads, you know, the traffic cones,
Yeah.
fighting in the street. And it was perfect because it was the perfect picture of what I wanted, that kind of humor, craziness, and fun. I literally got 95% of everything I wrote down.
Yeah.
Women think it's crazy, but here's what I didn't do. I didn't date to get married. I dated to get to know them. And also, by the way, I was not dating for affirmation from them. I was dating to see if I actually wanted to date them. And that was very different than what I had done in the past. I had spent the majority of my life looking for some kind of confirmation that I was good enough in other men. You see, when you step up into your own power, you don't need that. You're dating to see if you like them. You're dating to see if there's chemistry and connection. Because let me tell you, you got to have both. But it doesn't mean that you have to take the first 10 or 20 men that you date and make those your forever. I believe in actionable items, right? I mean, I am unapologetically alpha. I believe that you have to take the actionable steps, but I also believe in something that's greater than me. And I believe that when you decide that this is the way your life is going to be, the universe conspires to support you. And it will show up in the craziest of ways. Who would have thought that I would have met my husband on a dating app when so many people complain about it? I did it. So if I did it in my 40s after two divorces, then what can you do? What can you do?
Yeah, and here's my favorite part about that. You and I have both been through the ringer. We've both been through some stuff, and I always refer to it as falling back into the fire. And one of my earliest keynote speeches was called "Some Days Your Phoenix Rides a Pogo Stick," meaning something good happens, we fall back in the fire, we
Mm-hmm.
burn our tail feathers off again. But every
Mm-hmm.
time we rise up higher, the feathers grow back. They're stronger. They're more vibrant colors. They're more beautiful. And the higher we
Mm-hmm.
fly. So every time we fall back in, we learn something. And that qualifies us to be experts on things that we have experienced. Now, you've got this amazing marriage. I've got this incredible 16, almost 16-year relationship with my Tina. Between the two of us, how many letters do we have after our names for certification on relationships and dating combined? How many do we have between us?
I don't know, the entire alphabet, if I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, in real life experience, but so many people say, "Well, Steve, yeah, but you talk about all this stuff. What's your certifications?" I'm like, none. I have no letters after my name.
Right.
But shouldn't you get no, don't need it. In a few years ago, enough people had been snotty about it. Like, why should I listen to you? I'm like, well, I don't know, because your life sucks and mine's really good, and I can give you some clues as to how you can make yours better. They're like, yeah, but what certifications do you have? And I've got a little chalkboard here on the barnboard wall of my recording studio. And one day I just got so tired of people being snotty, and I just wrote down, "This guy lived it." And I drew an arrow and I
Yeah.
put my head right in front of the arrow, took a selfie and sent it to that person. And I said, "Hey, be a client or don't be a client. I don't give a rat's ass, really." I went through the fire. I didn't read this out of a book. I survived
Mm-hmm.
every single day of it, for better or for worse, along the way. And all the bad stuff that led to all this good stuff and all the learning experiences and all the stories that I've got now for the stage, that's the same thing where people say, "Hey, Steve, how do you make up those stories you share?" Wow, you really have not been following me for long if you don't realize, and for you as well, people may say, "Michelle, how do you come up with all this great content?" Well, a lot of it comes out of pain and being
Oh
aware
gosh,
and
yeah.
being authentic and being
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable enough to not put our ugliest stories out there as a pity party or bashing ourselves, but to show other people who might be feeling the same pain, stuck in the shadows where they're hiding themselves, where we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
They can come on out into the light too, and it's not going to burn, but they can learn something. And beautiful things grow in the light, by the way. So the more we shine ours, the more we get to help even more people.
I agree. Change is born in pain. It is truly. However, I'll add to that. Dr. Joe Dispenza is one of my most favorite authors. I
Mm-hmm.
love him. I love how he takes very complicated things and breaks them down in a tangible, bite sized way for you to completely revolutionize your life. But what he says is so many people wait until the pain overwhelms them before they actually look for the change. Now, my change was born in pain. It was born in a rock bottom moment, but it didn't have to be. It did not have to be. The other thing that I'll say is your best life is on the other side of the things you avoid. If you would just sit down and seriously take the time to write out a list of the things that you will not do, that you avoid, and really get to know yourself and why you avoid them. Because by having the courage to face the things that we don't want to deal with, we actually get the confidence, which builds on itself to actually have the love and the life that we want. It's not going to consume you the way you think it does. It actually is going to empower you in ways that I cannot convey. People think that it's hard for people to understand how shy, painfully shy I was in my past.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it floors people because I'm so outspoken, I'm so bold, and I'm so blunt now. But hello, it's because I did all the work. Do you want to know where my courage and tenacity came from? It was getting up off my knees and walking. That's what I did, step by step, even if they were baby steps. I didn't let the outside world control what I got. That's how I became one bold MF.
Now, if there's somebody listening right now, I know you generally work with women 40 plus who might be navigating through their lives and getting, into relationships and finding their unique fire and their beauty and their strength and their confidence. Someone is listening to this right now going, "Holy crap," and their heads are just nodding. the whole time. What is some advice you would give to these people to just get started, to understand that just by being curious about this and about hearing your story, what are the first steps that they could be taking or considering or pondering or putting into action to get themselves, off their knees to their feet so that they can begin walking?
Total responsibility is the ultimate flex for me, right? Take responsibility for your life. If you can do that, then you can start making changes in your life externally and internally. But at the end of the day, it's all an internal game. Mindset is the ultimate flex to me. The thing that I started with, that was the thing that I avoided, was forgiveness. And before you guys sigh and ho and hum about forgiveness, about how this person is so wrong and justify all the things that they did to you, I want to remind you that you have a story just like I have a story, just like Steve has a story. We all could list names upon names of people that have hurt us, that have done things to us that were unfair. But what I would encourage you to do is let it go. Now, it's easier said than done. I totally get it. But here's the thing. It does not condone their behavior, but you are energetically tethered to anyone that you give that much power to. So can you take the time to write down the people that you still think about and give, by the way, your time and energy to, because you're thinking about how much you don't like them? Can you sit down and practice forgiveness? There are great meditations on this. This is what I did. And I'll tell you what, the first person I forgave, by the way, was my mom, because I had to. I had to do it. I had to forgive her. And this is what I did. And I don't have a meditation recorded for this. However, I'm going to give you guys the Cliff Notes version. Is that okay with you, Steve?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I would sit down on my floor with tissues, by the way. Okay. If my walls could have talked back then, they would have been on Jerry Springer. No shit. So I would sit down on the floor and I would count to 10, breathing in, breathing out. And then I would go to a park. My mom would be sitting on a bench underneath a tree. She would be waiting for me. I would walk up to her. I would sit down on the bench next to her, and she would never say anything to me, but she would look at me. And I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about this. So I would tell her all the things that she did that broke my heart. And I yelled and screamed in my mind, by the way. And I would just get it all out. And then I would complete it. And my mom would always say, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And when I felt complete for that day, I would come out of the meditation and I would do it over and over and over and over until there was no animosity or resentment for my mother. And I can tell you, at this stage of my life, I have such empathy for that woman and for the things that she experienced in her own childhood at the hands of her own mother. And by working on that story with her, by forgiving her, not only have I gotten to know the woman that she was and why she was the way she is, or she was, I have completely cut the generational trauma that I would have passed down to my own daughter. Wow. You have no idea how powerful all of this is. When you heal yourself, you heal other people. Responsibility first, forgiveness second.
Wow. That is powerful. I'm just sitting here just in awe of that, of the strength of it, and also your way to explain it. And how often do we hear people say, well, this person is this way. Oh, their family's been like that for generations. Well,
yeah.
None of them ever said, I'm going to draw the freaking line in the sand right now and jam a flag in there and say, my kids are not going to deal with everything. My identity is not going to be the identity of everyone that came before me. And I love that you saw that your mom had gone through so much that made her into who she was. And maybe she didn't have the time or wasn't strong enough or didn't have anyone who believed in herself enough, including herself, to have made the changes that maybe somewhere in her head and in her heart she wished she could have made, which you have now done.
There's a Bible verse, and I may be screwing this up, but it's God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. There's power in that. There is no undoing what has happened in the past. And by the way, nothing in my past has changed. The people, the events, the heartbreak, it's all still there. But what it means to me is different. Instead of using my past as a reason to show up in my life in a toxic way, I use my past as the reason to show up in my life in a powerful way.
Yeah.
So you're never going to be able to go back and change any event that's happened. What's in the past is in the past. But are you willing to look at it? Are you willing to question what all those things mean to you? And do you have the courage to choose something different? Not only for yourself, but for your family and for your children, because you have the power right now to create the life that you deeply desire. As soon as you decide, by the way, that that's what you want.
And that decision is just the first step. All those old memories, all that old wiring, people think, it's like what happens every year around New Year's. People say, New Year, new me. And I'm like, oh, if only
There we
it was that
go.
easy. Here we go. I'll
Mm-hmm.
see you January 3rd, plowing through a double cup at Dairy Queen or something for your health goals. And they say, oh, I just couldn't do it. Well, sure you can. What you're allowing is your old self to take over the wiring. You're listening to that
Mm-hmm.
old voice. We call it imposter syndrome. We hear about that all the time, the imposter voice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 55 years old, and people have said, well, Steve, it's great that you conquered the imposter voice. I'm like, how do you know I conquered it? Well, when's the last time that it tried to derail you? I'm like, what time is it? Seriously, it's
Yeah,
there
exactly. That's
all the time.
so much truth. Yep.
Yeah. And I created this hashtag. It's hashtag up yours because, I got to be careful what I say online and I'm not a profane guy anyway. And it makes people laugh. So I've got a little sign, and every once in a while, if I'm having a tough day and I'm struggling, I'll just hold it up and I'll take a selfie and just say, hey, imposter voice, up
Mm-hmm.
yours. And it gets me back on track. And I tell people, I said, look, my imposter voice didn't just get the little Sharpie with the name tag, hi, my name is. I said, I got the embroidered freaking shirt. It's just as real as it ever was. But now I know that I'm stronger than that. And when it
Mm-hmm.
does pop up, maybe I get reminded of a failure in my life or something that didn't work, or somebody pops into my life and that old self starts to rise up again. Well, hang on a second. This is who I am now. This is where I'm going. These are the people I choose to be around. This is what I love about myself now. Here are my successes that tell me that I'm no longer that person. So stop trying to grab me by the ankles to trip me up and pull me
Mm-hmm.
back into that old self. So, if you deal with something similar, how do you get through that when that little voice pops up every once in a while? Because I know it does, because welcome to life. We're both pretty out there
Right.
and pretty bold in how we share ourselves with the world. So I know between the haters and the, people tearing us down and just memories of old wiring, how do you deal with that?
A journal, a lot. Journaling has been pivotal to the success that I've been able to create because it holds all of my most heartfelt prompts and thoughts.
Mm.
It's been a safe place for me to land. It's also where I write all of my gratitude. But I'm a why chick. It drives some of my friends crazy because when they say something, I always follow up with why. And, and I'll go off into the specifics of their whatever they're thinking. But I challenge myself a lot. I still write down what I avoid. It's not like I just came out of the gates running and all of a sudden I have all this confidence and all this courage and all this tenacity and all this power. I am a thought human. I am a feeling human, and I still suffer with some of the things that, showed up in my childhood and in my young adult life, and frankly, my entire life. So what I do is when I feel that tug to settle, to shrink, I always write down why. Why do you believe that? What's going on? And I keep on asking until I get to the root of it, because I'll be honest with you, we have superficial bullshit that shows up all the time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like you'll have the superficial thought, but that's not really it. That's not the real reason. And you are the only person that knows what's really driving that. And if you think about it, it looks like something like this. So when I was dating, for example, in the beginning, I am flexing my newfound boundaries and my newfound mindset, but it's still scary. And when I was rejected right before I met my husband, by the way, I was just heartbroken. And so I started writing down, what does this mean? Why do you believe this? What's going on? And really what it came down to was I tried and I failed. And I'm a failure. So that meant I was a failure. And it's just challenging that belief and going, is that true though? Is that true? And I can guarantee you every time you do something, anything, as a matter of fact, that is uncomfortable for you and to you, you will be faced with all of the limiting beliefs that you've ever had. I kid you not. And this is where people stop because it's too overwhelming. It's too time consuming. I don't want to deal with this right now. If you're an alpha like I am, you're a doer. You don't feelings. What? We don't do feelings, but the power is in your feelings. So what you have to do is identify it. And I mean, hey, like getting to know yourself, you're the one person you're going to be with for the rest of your life. Don't you think you need to get to know who you are and why you do the things you do so you can actually have the life that you want? Because this is a short ride around the sun. My mom lived to be 36. Her ride was very short. Some people have longer rides. But what are you going to do with the time that you do have?
Yeah. And
you have a choice.
People ask sometimes, what would be your biggest regret? And mine is being 85 years old, sitting on the front porch, wondering why the hell I treated myself the way I did, why I didn't go for it, why I didn't believe in myself more in my earlier years. And then at that time, maybe I can't go out and physically do everything I'd wanted to do. And then that is a life wasted. And that's one of the reasons I live my life so out there, so authentically, so vulnerably, and so in color and just wildly in using my voice and being on camera and being on stage.
Yeah.
No, thank God this year I'm getting back out on live stages. I miss that so much. And
powerful, isn't it?
Oh, it's like having a slingshot for the past couple of years saying, well, we're pulling back, we're creating more content, we're getting stronger, we're getting better. Can't let go of this hand yet, but now this year I've already been back out on a couple stages and I've got more coming up. So excited about that. Now, as we wrap it up, Michelle, for anybody that's been sitting there nodding and taking notes this whole time and saying, holy crap, I got to reach out to Michelle. How can people find you and learn more about you and connect with you on social media, your website, etc.? How do people get in touch with One Bold MF?
You can visit my website, oneboldmf.com. You can schedule a clarity call with me. You can find me on Instagram at onebold_MF. You can email me at Michelle. It's with 2 L's, by the way. I truly believe that is the best way to spell Michelle, but I am frankly, obviously. So MICHELLE at oneboldmf.com. I encourage you to reach out if you are struggling with any of the things that I talked about. I'm life certified. I don't teach things that I have not done myself. I was my own guinea pig, literally.
Yep. That's what I tell people all the time. They go, Steve, how'd you learn all this? I said, man, I was my first client. And believe me, I was not a good client in the first couple of years.
Yep. Oh gosh, I know. I failed all the way to the life that I have right now.
Yep. Exactly. And I get the scars on every part of my body to prove my journey. And I know you do as well. And of course, now we just embrace the hell out of them because it makes us so very real.
Truly.
Absolutely. Michelle, thank you so much for being a part of the Motivational Firewood Radio Show. I know it took us a while to do this, but I'm so happy we did. And of course, I know this will not be the last time that we have a conversation like this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. It's always a pleasure.